Good afternoon. Wednesday, May 2nd, 1 p.m., meeting of the Historic District Commission's Organizational Focus Committee. We're here at the second floor training room at Ford Fairgrounds. President, myself, John McLaughlin, and Kathy Flynn. John, there's two of us. Can we just waive the formalities of, we'll accept the agenda and just have some discussion?
Yeah,
And we've got a quorum, but.
open the meeting, we have an open discussion.
Yeah, that's good.
Wait.
Okay, great. So first off, we have from some of the HDC commissioners, their questionnaire, their response to questionnaire we had put together for input from them. Kathy, can we have a copy of those?
Yes. And then there's the blank ones too. I'll just give you this.
And then for the record, John is going to keeps a copy of these, and then he'll have these available if anyone would like them. Oh, John did one too. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray. TJ's isn't here.
It's in there. It's in an email form. It's in there.
Oh, I see it. I'm sorry. I saw a staple. It's a photocopy of a staple. I thought they were stapled together.
I know. I did too.
Okay, great. So, John, you haven't had a chance to see these, and I was actually hoping John would give us a copy so we would each have one to look at. Mm-hmm. But that's fine. We'll work with what we got. Do you want me to just do a quick read through these so you?
Well, we review minutes, approve minutes, we're going down to.
Oh, I thought we were going to waive the agenda. Was the idea was just to have some discussion? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so
Wait.
there's no minutes to review at this point, or minutes to approve at this point that I'm aware of. We have no members of the public in attendance. You would think that the HDC
I know. I guess we're not important.
revamping building with Nantucket in mind and the organizational inputs and just questions and comments would be a hot topic on Nantucket.
Well, I think that's probably just the time of day. It's
Maybe
1
just
o'clock.
for us HDC geeks.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, so no public comment. John, we're on to new business, which is discuss the HDC Organizational Focus Committee initial questionnaire. Okay, so I'm just going to very briefly touch on out of diligence, so you're aware of it, and if you want to get a copy of these, we can get a copy. This is tinny. My understanding is if you point these at the ceiling, they're always going to give you feedback.
Let me talk back to you.
The tech was in, and he said, "It's tinny. Point them down."
Yeah.
Okay. John, so Jesse, I'll just give a real brief recap, okay, on these. To paraphrase and summarize, Jesse would like to see, believes that it's appropriate to update the old historic district, Wisconsin Historic District, and the outlying areas to keep up with the times, preserving the fabric of the act, and for the outlying areas to establish rules, regulations, and guidelines. He also would like to address solar panels. He believes those are okay, but that enforce solar panels are okay in commercial and outlying areas. Keep the buildings low with additive massing in the village areas. I think he echoes a lot of our statements too. Make it easier for applicants and staff, which is really one of the reasons why we're doing this, in addition to just kind of clarifying what it is we're doing. If we are able to streamline this better, more could be approved by staff, bring in more money by application fees and fines, so the HCs can have better resources to do their job. If there was a prominent style after 1950, we should consider trying to preserve the architectures. We don't want to whitewash the last 70 years. We need a stone sample book as terminologies can be different. You getting this? Mm-hmm. Okay. So these and any other inputs we get, the concept is that, I'll say it now before I continue to read, are going to be consolidated into a list that will sit here and talk about and try and come up with solutions on how to make a recommendation for the HTC to proceed with it.
Okay, can I have a copy of those?
John didn't.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, John didn't give me copies yet, but I think he might be waiting. If you're going to get copies, do you want me to continue to read these?
Hey, is there different than the one before it? No.
Yeah, well, thank you. Okay, Mr. T.J. Watterson. Let's see. So he's looking at the rules and regulations in the old historic district. He speaks on the windows, SDL versus TDL, and ways to work with those. Insulated windows not requiring triple tracks. Concerns about the triple tracks proliferating in the OHD. He believes that an SDL, historic reproduction window, looks more like a TDL. Hardscape is looking for some more clear-cut guidelines in the old historic district. Wisconsin Historic District windows, I think it's the same concept. SDLs that are historic reproduction that don't require triple track storm windows look more appropriate and consistent with the historic look than the triple track storm windows. Which commercial and public structures, concerns about perhaps massive and unnecessary scale that impacts negatively the surroundings, and this would be a good opportunity for the HTC to get into some case studies and look at inventory, what's successful and what has not been successful. Nantucket, some of the architecture is emblematic of architectural time and style that has come and passed, very true. Would like to see that era and that memory protected, although there are some undesirable, at this point, it is part of the history of Nantucket. Again, these are just paraphrasing. Our chairman, Ray Paul, is looking at the rewrite of the guidebook to remove vague or interpretive language, to be a little bit more definitive and insistent where it is applicable. Review, accept the dogma policies, and determine what's good, bad, irrelevant, or in need of modification. He gives an example: 1 foot setback from the first floor wall plane of an inset dormer, and then he goes on to elaborate on perhaps how that might be reviewed and what outcomes might be. He touches on the HCC's position on demolition, what vintage houses, what year, subject to review, or if all, what historical architectural significance, and obviously these are the things that are not considered contributing or significant currently. He talks about like-kind trim replacement, shingles, etc. Quidnet, Wawinnet, and Nantucket areas, he believes there should be zones of special interest as unique to where the scale and unique nature of the context informs the design for new construction. Objective review of new building materials with respect to both authenticity, durability, and the green factor to determine what's aesthetically appropriate. He also goes on to say that it's very difficult to have guidelines that accomplishes everything that we want to do because of the nature of the beast. And my personal favorite is creating a homogeneous environment that, you know, if everyone follows the exact same guideline, the risk is that in Nantucket 2050, not everything is going to look the same because there are going to be different styles of architecture. But when you look at a typical Nantucket style home, which is, you know, some hybrid of a cape with a dormer and some additive massing, they're all going to look remarkably the same because every single dormer is 3 feet in from from a rake, and every single dormer is 1 foot back from the eave. So that's a concern that I share, along with all these others, I think. He's looking at review of the appeal system and understanding and discussion of that, and how to implement it, and to what extent to begin a dialogue on the HDC's role as a preservation organization versus what's stated in our act, which is a little bit different than the HEC being solely a preservation organization. If it is determined that the HEC is a preservation organization, then we need to have very strong and enforceable language added to the act, which all makes sense. Thank you, Ray, Jesse, and TJ. John Hedden, our professional, our professional plus staff, is looking at concerns about demolishing structures, contributing buildings, and work orders, visible windows being TDL, buildings cited in the, I'm very generally touching on these because we're going to get into detail with them. Buildings to be cited for guidelines in the building with Nantucket in mind. He echoes the HVAC guidelines, no AC units on the front of the house, no mini splits on the front of the house. These are all with respect to the old historic district, the Wisconsin district, and outlying in commercial and public structures as I read this in those areas. And then he thinks that the other areas that we've talked about, Nantucket, Quidnet, and so on and so forth, need to have similar types of controls. He does not believe that building with Nantucket in mind is outdated. He just thinks that there needs to be a better following of the guidelines. And in discussions we've had, he's also looking at making it a little more user-friendly. He thinks that for consistency, we could designate staff to handle some applications in the office, such as roof changes and sheds. And he also believes the historic landscape of Nantucket needs to be protected when building on Nantucket, which is, you know, a really good sentiment. And of course, to streamline the HDC process in all possible ways. So again, that's a very brief reading of several pages of contributions from the commissioners and professional staff, and we'll distill this down into a format for review amongst all the other ideas that we've brought forth, and we're hoping to get some more feedback. I think we're waiting for feedback from 2 more members.
You mentioned Baldwin and Quidnet, if you live alone. I've been up there in Quidnet, you've got 25 old structures before 1930, you know, you're lucky.
Yeah.
And Baldwin, it's got maybe 12 cottages out there. So
Okay.
You're setting up different areas, you know. Eventually, you're going to want to form a committee to this or that. But you ought to just say, you know, we're going to run with 3 areas, and that's it.
Okay.
For now, you know.
So, no, I accept your point. Obviously, I think what I'd like to do though is not get into too much. I don't want to get into it too much because we're going to start to pick that apart before we do a recommendation once we have the full list in front of us, so we can organize it, and then we can talk about similar topics all at once. For instance, Nantucket, Quidnet, Monomoy, whether any of these need, you know, and to what extent, and how best to develop some type of architectural guideline or rules and regulations. Is that okay? You good with that?
But you know, I just want to see, I don't want to see us open a can of worms to every little hamlet, you know? That's when we get in trouble. But anyway, that's my opinion. So
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and again, we're going to get into that with great detail, both here and then with the wider group, and then see where they want to take it, whether it's, you know, keeping it in-house or public forums or whatnot. I'm sure there's going to be public forums on a bunch of stuff.
But I have to tell you, I was downtown coming up for a walk, and the Ridden boy,
The solar stuff?
solar stuff, you know, he showed me the building inside, you know. It had an old building, by God, it is old, back maybe in the 20s, you know.
Yeah.
But geez, what he's doing in there is, he got volunteers. Where he got them from? There must have been 15 guys inside that building. they strapped it all off, you know, and it was a plaster board. And they're all working for free. They want to get, you know, so many hours in education on it. So he's telling them what to do. He showed me the outside where it's gonna be, there's a flat roof thing there, right looking in from the road. But it's gonna have, you won't see the panels up there. You know, I guess he's putting something in front of it. I don't know. He explained a few things to me. I said, you don't have to tell me. I just keep on going. If there's a mistake, we'll straighten it out. You know, so he's happy with it. So he's gonna have outside planting in a little patio or whatever.
And this is the solar, he's got a program for solar and alternative energy, is that what it is? And that's gonna be housed in the building?
Yeah, it's gonna be up in the roof.
Yeah.
And the gable goes this way to the street, but he done something that hasn't been done in years. When you cap the roof, he capped it with wood.
Yeah.
It was even natural, I guess, and that's where he's doing, you know. Paint the damn thing a gray color,
Yeah.
blend in with the rest of the roof.
I remember when we used to do that before they came out with ridge cap.
Yeah, right, yeah, that's right, yeah. Anyway, just say I mentioned that too much, you know.
All right, well, I appreciate that,
I
you know,
don't
little
like talking
tidbit,
one-on-one, you know.
little social fabric goes a long way. Do you want, we have Brad Fleming here, do you want to touch base? We do have on our agenda next unfinished business, one of them is the Nantucket Advisory Board submitted area and the area, Nantucket Advisory Board area and historic district plans. Just state for the record that Nantucket Advisory did not have a quorum yesterday. We had scheduled to meet with them to review getting their guidelines in for the historic district in that area and any rules and regulations, trying to jumpstart that a little bit. But Brad, if you want to come on up, please don't be a stranger. And
Good afternoon, everyone.
grab a seat. How are you?
Brad Fleming, Chairman of the Nantucket Advisory Board. After your last meeting, as requested, I sent you some plans as far as delineating what the HDC's purview should be in Nantucket. And John, I know you made copies of it. So one plan was an area that should be under the MAB purview, and another one was to create, I think might be problematic, an historic district in Nantucket. And I think that's really all we should discuss right now. We are working on some guidelines from Nantucket, but after personally after reviewing Building with Nantucket in mind, much of the information is there already as far as massing. We have height restrictions, everything else. We can, maybe with some photographs, we can put that into the Nantucket area, the MAB purview. But just as a side note, I think a lot of, well, I know the Nantucket Advisory Board is guilty of, we look at a new structure as, is it appropriate? Does it meet building in mind guidelines? They do, but it should be very site appropriate with the neighborhood. And I think on a lot of areas we've kind of like dropped the ball. It meets the guidelines, but it does not meet the area. So when a new application for a new building comes in, it should be, we should go for a site, all the boards should go for a site review and look at the peripheral buildings that's surrounding it.
And you're referring to your board?
I mean, that's a comment for, I think, for all the boards. I think applications come in, it meets our guidelines. You know, you're talking about dormers, setbacks, 3 feet in, 1 foot in.
Right.
You know, TDL if it's an historic district, but it really has to fit in with the immediate neighborhood, not just the general purview.
Gotcha. So okay, so what we had actually asked for, I mean, just to clarify for the record, what we had asked for were updates to the area plan, update to what you had proposed would be some form of an area of special concern. You were talking about it being the Nantucket Historic District. We did understand that it may be something that's not actually technically an historic district, that part of what we would be doing in a recommendation is looking into the what, how, and when of all that being what's involved with being a historic district. Is there a benefit to it? Is there a basis for it? Should it instead be an area of special concern? It sounds like now what you're asking for is just to have the maps reviewed and approved by the full commission. Personally, I don't see an issue with having the maps reviewed with the following exceptions. For the area plan, obviously it would be and I'm asking for clarification on this particular point, all you're asking for is to expand the area to encompass the area of the Nantucket Advisory Board oversees and reviews. Okay, so that's point number one. Okay, and you clarified that that's what you're looking for. So expand the area via the new map, acceptance of new map.
I have a question.
Yep.
How many are on the Medical Advisory Board now?
We currently have 5. Unfortunately, due to health issues, it's difficult for us to meet a quorum, and we're looking into possibly getting some replacements.
Yeah, okay. I'm just curious how many total, 5 is, I think, is enough to make study and recommendations back to the commission once we get rolling.
But if you don't have a quorum, it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think that's, well,
No, you need
Clearly.
3.
I know, well, we're
Yeah.
planning on meeting, I was in the office today, I talked to John. There is going to be a meeting scheduled for this coming Tuesday.
Yeah.
And if you and, both of you and Valerie want to come, I think there will be a quorum. So-
okay, so you guys, I was under the impression you weren't meeting for 2 weeks. Are you meeting so that we can meet with you?
Well, because of health issues for other people and I was
Yeah.
away, we couldn't get a quorum. And John said, you can schedule any meeting anytime you want as long as it's posted ahead of time.
Yeah, sure, you guys
So-
don't have to meet.
I talked to John today, it's going to be posted, we're going to have a meeting on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, and I believe there should be a quorum.
Okay, and then with respect, so the other thing I'm trying to determine is with respect to your agenda for Tuesday, 9 a.m., is there, are you reviewing Nantucket area submissions, or are you having the meeting to meet with us so we know what time to be there and post our own notice?
To answer your second question, yes. The first question, I don't know if we passed the deadline to review things that should have been reviewed yesterday. I don't
Any
know.
insight on that? Sorry to interrupt, Fred. Any insight on that?
I don't know.
You may not
I mean,
know.
isn't there a time frame that how things work?
10 days.
Yeah.
10 days,
So-
but like 11 East Street went to a meeting, but it was health representation.
So that would give us time, because that is
Yeah.
one of my major
I'll double
concerns.
check with, because I updated it for your next advisory board meeting, which I thought was gonna be in 2 weeks.
Yes.
But that's fine, if you're gonna do it next week. And so I left everything that hasn't been approved on there for your review, because a few of the items they wanted you to review. They wanted Nantucket advisor to review, which was one of them was 11 East Street.
That's my major concern.
Yes, so there were a few, so I think we're okay. But
So
I'll verify with John,
so very likely we should just post our meeting for 9 a.m.
along with.
to meet with you all.
Okay.
Okay, just so I'm clear on, and
Yeah.
I've got to inform Dale and
What
whatnot.
about our Wednesday meetings? Is still gonna continue?
So what Brad's talking about is the meeting we were supposed to have yesterday morning, we'll have this coming Tuesday morning
At 9.
at 9. And then what we're talking about now is maybe changing what it is we were gonna do with them Tuesday, which segues back to the whole discussion about the area and the historic district map and rules and regulations and guidelines. So Brad, what we had asked for was some real specifics so that we can then in turn review them, try and poke holes in them as both volunteer citizens and members of the HDC, and round them out based on those things, including, our 4 hours a week or 5 hours a week reviewing applications every week. So that what we then in turn would provide a recommendation on to the full member commission was something, of substance, and they could say, we like the package, we want you to change this, we don't want you to change that, let's hopefully move forward. Not unlike the sign committee comes in, they want to have their rules and regulations changed. They didn't come in, nothing against pictures, I think it's a great help, but they came in with, it wasn't a huge list of things, but they came in with a very concrete, this is what we want to do in these areas, these are the rules, the regulations, and the guidelines we want to have upheld. These are the things we're concerned about, with a list of things that they then worked into a change into the sign rules and regulations. So that's where we were, thinking if we're going to present something to the full commission, we want to have a full recommendation. We're not going to go to them with something piecemeal.
Mhm.
That's where we were. It sounds like what you're saying, and I'm just looking for clarification so I know how to proceed with this, is that, one, the area plan, you don't think that there needs to be any other guidelines or rules. They're there, and they just need to be looked at in the context of a site. When in the context of the homes or the structures around a particular address when an application comes in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then two, with respect to the historic district, I'm not certain I'm not sure I understand. Can you elaborate? Where do you want that to go?
So, in the past, since we last met,
Yeah, please.
Val gave me a copy of an old, the 1992 building with historic in mind, building with Nantucket in mind. There's most of the information is there, but I think it just needs to be cut and paste and clarified and put it into the Nantucket area. I mean, some things obviously are not germane. And I think most of it's written already.
Right. So, okay.
I'll do the cut and paste if you want, and then you can say, well, this is superfluous, but
No, I don't think, look, my personal feeling, John, chime in if you have a comment on this, but, so what Brad's saying is take what already exists and excerpt out anything that Nantucket Advisory Board feels is relevant or could be relevant to a new, and we're using the term historic district loosely.
Right.
Not in the way that the state uses it in their legislation. At this point, we're just using it loosely to denote something that has more historic significance than the overall area. So you're saying take it out of excerpt those portions that are relevant from the guidebook, including guidelines, rules and regulations for the old historic district and the Wisconsin historic district, and maybe even the outlying areas, and then put them into one sheet for consideration.
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Do you have a thought, just so I was clear, do you have a thought on how to proceed with that? It's kind of what you were saying to do.
Yeah. What I had, I took only two things voted by the commission, was 1992 and whatever the other was. I got copies of them, and I'll give them Tuesday, I'll give them a copy. This is what you gotta work on, tightening down in Nantucket or anywhere else. But
I agree.
it'll be three historic districts missing, and each will have recommendations in it, and some that will fit here might not fit there. So we gotta just pass that out. Is it good to leave it there or take it out? So that's what we're gonna have to work on, set rules and regulations for three different areas. Once you got that done, that's I'll say 60% of the problem. The other is the guidebook, the way it's written now, it's outdated, a lot of it.
All right.
So
So,
trophy houses and all that stuff, so.
okay, so on the
Well,
Nantucket
that's why I'm
stuff,
saying it should be very, very site-specific.
Right.
Look at your neighborhood.
Yeah.
What is appropriate? I mean, obviously, I'm thinking Nantucket,
Yeah.
but I mean, regardless, sometimes we just, all the boards look at something and say, yes, it meets our guidelines, but you forget where that house is actually being placed with the surrounding houses.
right, and Nantucket being, look, Nantucket being as small as it is, it's difficult regardless based on the density and the number of structures, just to keep all that in mind. Which is why we were looking for you guys to give us being the group that's gonna review it, try and poke holes in it for constructive gain, and then issue the recommendation. We were looking for you to give us some input. It sounds like we're gonna change a little bit how we do that, but it's still gonna be important for you guys, for you if you volunteer, which we'd appreciate. John had volunteered. What he did is you printed up the rules and the regulations from the appendix for
Right out of the book.
okay, right out of the book. So what he was gonna do, you're gonna bring a copy for each of the members, or what were you gonna do?
Yeah, I got some here.
Okay, so he was gonna bring a copy, pass them out, and we were gonna let John lead the group and say, which ones do you wanna keep, which ones don't you? What other thoughts do you have? And again, and I think it's important, I mean, this is an opportunity, you know, we want to streamline the process by which we create something so we can get it done. But it's also important, since we're all getting together, and at least you all are getting together, to put down what you don't want to see, what you don't think is part of the historic fabric. You know, make what comments you can so that we can review them when we're all sitting down at, you know, reasonable list. And we can review them while we're all sitting here and then come up with something. I would just hate, the point is this, is I would hate to go through this exercise, have you guys go through this exercise, have the HCC go through this exercise, and anything that results from that exercise in terms of everyone else having to be involved, if there is an actual historic district versus a special area of concern. Only to find out that we had a big hole here. We missed this, this, and this. When if we each had taken an extra little bit of time, we wouldn't miss it. That's my only concern, and that's why we wanted to give it back to you, so that, because you're the folks who live there, you're the folks who brought this to the HDC commissioners as a concern. It sounds like we're all on the same page. I'm just stating it for clear expectations. That's all.
No,
Do you? Are you good with that?
Yeah,
or-
no,
Okay.
I do. I mean, I brought this up the last time, and I think I read it in the minutes when you were talking about something at the hospital for some area, some garden, and you talk about the brickwork and the things like that. But is there some way we can get into landscaping? As I mentioned before, privet in Nantucket is not appropriate, and I don't know if that can be remedied by the HDC or not, or it's not. It's never going to be in our purview. But Nantucket is old and funky, and there shouldn't be any privet there. I mean, there is some, actually, and it's old.
When you say privet, you're talking about sheared hedgerows?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. May I?
No.
Okay, so I'm pretty clear on my understanding that we as the HDC, and therefore you guys as an extension, don't have purview over landscaping materials, like a particular landscape material. There's kind of a gray area that transitions into where we do have control, which is lack of visibility and screening and things along those lines. Some might even argue that there's still a gray area when it comes to using plant material as a screening element for lack of visibility. I think this is one of those areas that, specifically with respect to Nantucket, and then John, as relates to other areas, the old historic district in Sconset, it's going to be one of those things that's in our phase 2, and it's going to be, what does the HDC and the old historic, the Sconset historic district, and again using the term loosely, the Nantucket historic district, and in other areas want to accomplish, if anything, using landscaping as screening or as an architectural element in the landscape. Because as you're saying, you have this privet and it's all sheared. Well, it's a fence.
But that's an architectural element.
It's an architectural, exactly. We aren't able legally, my guess, is to address privet as an architectural element unless it's in the act, unless there's legislation to it, which I believe, I think, then, I don't want to get into too much about this because I don't want somebody at home texting and saying, you shouldn't be talking about landscaping. I'm not suggesting we're making a decision about landscaping. What I'm suggesting to you is it's a valid point for discussion, whether you're in Nantucket, the old historic district, or Sconset. It's something that I believe our recommendation would state to the full commissioners, that it's a valid point that landscape material, plant materials can be used as an architectural element, and should the HDC seek to be involved in that. I'm not suggesting we should, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, I'm suggesting we should have the discussion, and that I believe that that is one of the examples of a discussion that should have some community input, because it does change, to some extent, the fundamental nature of what the HDC does if they're getting involved in what type of plants are used how, which is really what we're talking about. Again, I'm not speaking for or against. I think we need to have a discussion about it. With respect to what you guys are doing right now, I would say put that on your list, because the more we know, like if you say, for instance, the Nantucket Advisory Board, the Wisconsin Advisory Board, the Historic Structures Board that does the Old Historic District, each come in and say, we have a concern about privet being used as an architectural element, or Leyland cypress. Well, then we have that in front of us that we can put on the list for phase 2, which is more structural type changes, or
Or
discussion.
as a
about.
recommendation, no teeth to it or anything else, but
Yes.
be cognizant of the area in which you live.
Yes.
And what is appropriate and what is not.
Yes. Yes.
And we can say landscaping is included in that, even though we cannot dictate.
Yep. And if we have it from you, it's, then we know it's in you. I mean, I know it, but if we have it on a piece of paper and we translate that, things get lost in the shuffle if it's not on paper. Oh, who said that about the privet in Nantucket? Was he talking about natural privet? Was he talking about sheared privet? What was he, you know what I mean? If it's on a piece of paper and it's on the list of concerns, it may not be that it's actual a guideline that you take out of the book that you want to use or you change, but it's something that's an area of concern, whether it's privet or something else, whether it's the brick material versus stone material, whether it's stone walls versus whatever it is. If you put it on your list, we can track it and and bring it through the process, so that if we can't deal with it right away, we can at least put it on the agenda to be dealing with it. Because what we're going to do is we're going to chunk this stuff down once we get all the information.
I hope so.
Nantucket's the first group, but I think it'll be a good, right? It'll be a template for how to do some of the other stuff. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I've always said about landscaping, it has nothing to do with architecture. I as architect, it's not an architectural element, And the state law says we should judge the 5 exterior of any structure. That's all it says. If landscaping is in there, you should take it out, because it's causing nothing but problems. One guy says, last night, they had one of the roof things, how do you call them? Yeah, I'm slipping.
A pergola?
No, the elements, to make electricity.
Oh, solar?
The solar on this house, I forget where.
Well, that'll be my next thing. So John, I understand what you're saying. However, if, say you're driving up Main Street, okay, and you see, 3 bricks, there's not a whole lot there. They've got a small little fence there with some hydrangeas. But when you look at other pieces of property, you see the house, but the landscape sets the view of that historic house. Without the landscape, it's just a barren historic house.
I think he might, John, can you clarify for me? Are you talking about it? I think he's talking about it the opposite way you are, in a sense. What you're saying is that we're using landscape to approve stuff that we wouldn't approve if there wasn't landscaping, right? So using solar as an example, perhaps.
Yeah, so we're going to get, hopefully.
Okay, but using solar as an example, you guys are saying 2 different things. I just want to, my job here at the moment is to facilitate understanding, and I want to make sure I understand. Brad is saying that when you put up a wall of privet and you shear it, and it looks like a wall, or any plant, let's not pick on privet today, whatever it is, it becomes an architectural element because you can no longer, it's like a fence. You could have a tent, there's nothing in the old historic district right now, except for close to an intersection, in my understanding, in Wisconsin or downtown, and I think downtown is better, downtown Nantucket is a better example, that would prevent someone from having a 30-foot tall hedge around the front of their property. And if it were the 3 bricks, I'm not saying they would do this or they should do this, but if it were the 3 bricks in that little spit of land they had in front, if they put in cypress trees and they let them grow 30 feet and they sheared them, it would change the view and the understanding, the historic fabric of
And
those
you would have no
structures.
say over it.
And as it is right now, we have no say over it. That's what Brad's saying. He's saying in Nantucket, there's different issues with it, but basically that's what he's saying. What you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, did I get that pretty much
Yes.
right? Okay. What you're saying is, by having landscaping in there, in a way, we're allowing it to be used as a screening element so that people can put up things like a solar array where we would not normally allow it. Is that, an example of one of the things you were saying?
Well, the way I'm looking at it is that, how am I gonna say this? I just had a thought here. If you say, to save a lot of time on this landscaping, you just say, look, nothing other than trees, so you start at more than, say 6 feet tall. So if they want to put in 6 foot of hedges, you know, that's fine. You know, whether it will screen or not is not the question. You're not there to screen something. You're there to show it.
So you're saying you don't want landscaping to be used to create a lack of visibility?
But you use that all the time.
Well, that's what he's saying, it's a problem.
So somebody puts in, you know, a mini split line,
Yeah.
or anything like that, or now the solar arrays, we don't like them on the roof, we prefer to have them on the ground, and guess what, if you see it from the street, put up some screening so you can't see it. So you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, John.
No, he's,
Let me go back to that.
I think I'm trying, let me, please, I want to interrupt, because I think it's important that we get a bait. Look, if we don't understand one another, what the hell are we doing here talking? And we got to come to a common understanding. Just please answer a couple questions. You believe that landscaping shouldn't be used to screen inappropriate architectural elements and structures?
That is correct.
Okay. And you feel that that sometimes that happens now?
Let me go past
Okay,
it.
please, I got 2 more questions. You feel sometimes that happens now?
Yes,
Okay. You don't think that should be happening?
that's right.
Okay, so when you say landscaping should come out, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, now,
One word, landscaping.
On the
Can
other
define it better.
okay, and on the other side of it, do you think that there are instances where you shouldn't allow landscaping to be 30 feet tall and obstruct a historic structure?
You can start it out at somewhere. You got to start somewhere. If you say, well, you want to put hedges right across your front of your property, you know, and your house is back there somewhere, and you want to screen it from the street view, fine. You got to put it in at 6 feet.
Okay.
I've seen more people apply. We're going to put, you know, as you say, basically hedges in front of something. You know, well, I don't want people to see it, so we're going to put hedges in. You know? We tell them, all right, you got to put the hedges in at a minimum starting, so that people don't watch it for 3 years, and all of a sudden it's up to 8 feet, you know, blocking the view of the house.
Okay.
I think that's important.
Okay, no, I get you. And then, Brad, I'm going to give you the floor just a second. I just want to try and loop that in a little bit. John, what if, and I'm not saying we're doing this, we should set up a text line, because I know there's a couple of people who actually watch this, and they can text in their thoughts, and we'll read them out loud. Just a thought along the lines of what you're saying. What if, and I know we're doing what I didn't want to do, which is getting into details at this point in time, but what if, it's topical with Maggie, what if a hedge were only allowed to be as tall as a fence that would be approved in the same location? So
Yeah,
for
type
instance,
2 picket fence.
right, type 2 picket fence is 3 feet in the front, 4 feet on, I'm just saying current, not the exact, every application is done this way. I'm not saying, I'm saying be careful of the homogeneous nature of everything being done a certain way. But I'm just saying for the sake of discussion, what if the front were 3 feet, which is a picket fence, type 2 fence, the side could be up to 4 feet, up to the line of the parallel with the front of the house, which is how we typically do fencing, whether it's board and lattice or just board. And then behind it can be whatever, you know, height,
6 feet, whatever.
6 feet or whatever it needs to be. Is that something that is consistent with what you're saying?
Yes. I'll tell you what happened last night. A lot of things went through last night if you don't believe.
Okay, I don't want to get into that right now unless it's about the Nantucket stuff.
Right, okay, even Nantucket, the
Okay.
fence. But you go up Surfside Road, there's that new development on the right.
Yeah.
Before you get to Augie's Road.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
before South Shore.
The back road backs up onto the housing authority. Well, the guy had, I'm just
Sure
saying,
it comes,
the
right?
guy had this piece of property, he had the house, he said, say this is the yard. He's got the house, I'll say right here.
It's a barren right now.
The front door is going towards the housing authority, but there's no road back there.
Right.
But he applied to have 6 foot around the whole perimeter. There's one in there that has it. And all of us tried to change it. I recommended last night, I said, why don't you say any perimeter fencing, all right? Because if it's 6 foot high, they just, well, we could use a 5 and 1, you know? But what you're doing, you're catalyzing the neighborhood. You know,
You're isolating it.
You're
yeah.
putting it all here.
Right.
And I mentioned that, so in the future, we're going to be working on this. You might get, if it's the back of the house, you might get 6 foot on the back lot, if it's back in another property. But around here, you gotta have picket in the front and no more than 4 feet high on the side. That solves your problem. You're not arguing about, you know, that Xbox lattice or anything else. 4 foot is enough to keep a dog and kids safe. That's the main thing to me, you know?
I don't think that's what they were looking for,
Last
John.
night, they've gotten a hell of a discussion on it, which you shouldn't have wasted our time on.
Okay.
But I say that's something we're gonna have to change that too. A lot of things have to go and look into.
So I'm just gonna segue, because John's brought it up. One of the things that and this might relate to some of the things that come up with Nantucket, so I think it's worth bringing up to you, Brad, because you're obviously the person, you're the chair, and you're the one who's most involved, so it's good for you to understand what our process is gonna be. Very briefly is, things like that, we might take out. So for instance, when I say things like that, I'm talking about fencing. We might take that out and advance a recommendation to the HDC so that it can be acted on more quickly than a bigger project or a phase 2 type thing, which is like, is privet a landscape architectural element under the act, or is plant material used as a living barrier or fence actually something under the act? That's like down the road stuff. But stuff like this might be addressed, one, as you said, as a guideline or a policy, a recommendation to people, because you know there is more than a salutary effect by sitting here and saying, well, we're concerned about your privet being 6 feet tall in the front. You bring it up, they may give a little bit, and you accomplish what you need to. The fact is, though, is if you want to have a lasting effect, then it has to be something that's codified, because the next owner can come in and do whatever they want if it's not part of the HDC approval. For instance, pool fences. One of the things we came up with was, instead of it being not visible at the time of inspection, now our standard is not visible at the time of inspection and thereafter. So that whatever happens.
How does that fix?
Well, what happens is if John goes out there and inspects it and he can see the pool fence, and we're talking about a particular kind at the moment.
Well, it has to be 4 feet high by code, right?
Right, but if it's the chicken wire and it's got posts, some members felt it should be a guideline and a policy that we don't allow it to be visible, and that's the accepted standard. So we're working with an accepted standard here, and one of the ways that we came up with a solution so that the next person didn't come in, the HCC approved it. But
Set a precedent.
and it was approved that at the time of inspection, it wasn't visible. The problem is someone else comes in and buys the property and they take the landscaping out, they want to do something else, but they leave the fence there. It still meets the HDC approval. So what we did is we instilled this or thereafter part. We don't have that type of control with a recommendation at the table is we're concerned about the height of that privet in your front yard being 7 feet tall as shown on your plan. I'll take it down to 3 feet. It'll be like that when you inspect my house. Great, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something else. If somebody else comes in or
Doesn't
later,
maintain
there's
it.
nothing that has to be that, yeah. So, and we could write or thereafter, but we have no real control over a plant material. So I'm just saying that that type of thing is something that needs to be looked at and discussed both from the historic fabric perspective, and it involves, I think, a bigger group than just the HDC. I think it involves the areas, it involves more people than just 5 people or 8 people elected and appointed sitting at a table to make a decision about changing the act. In the meantime, we got a lot of other stuff we can address. Perhaps brick, stone, driveway materials in Nantucket. The things that when you walk around and you look at 10 houses, if you walk around and look at 10 houses that are what we're calling, recent history, Nantucket versus.
You wouldn't be happy.
Right. Well, no, I don't mean like stuff built in the last 10 years. I mean stuff that's been there for anywhere between, 40 and 70 years.
Yeah.
If you walked around and you looked at those and then you compared them to 5 of those and then you compared them to 5 that are new builds, anything in the last 20
They
or
don't
30
compare.
years. And you made a list of the things that are on the old builds versus the new, so you had yes and no's. That would be really helpful for us in making a recommendation. Doesn't have to be super detailed, it could just be like, most driveways don't have a cobblestone apron that's 10 feet deep, or they do. Or most driveways don't have a driveway, brick apron, or, you know what I mean?
Most driveways are shell driveways.
Yes, but this is what I'm saying.
And also, when you bring up fencing, I can think of very few instances where we have any sort of fencing at all.
Right.
Unless it's a split rail, and it's pretty much on your sides and not the front.
Right.
I mean, these are things that we can put in, but I also think maybe to help
It would be very helpful.
people, especially on the HDC, rather than just going through everything, these are the things that we like. These are the things we don't like. If we're missing something that we're not describing, help us out here.
Yes, and that's what we hope to do. The only thing I caution you, and I think I just say it because John makes a big, I think a very valid point about this. Like and dislike are, it's,
Okay,
just link it to what's appropriate historically.
Not
Yes.
like it, it's like, what is appropriate?
And
what
I'm
is
not saying playing word game. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's a matter of semantics. I'm saying, because then the tendency then is to base it on what it is that's important, which is that time period in Nantucket that you're trying to preserve. So it keeps everybody grounded in that perspective. It's not a semantics, well, he said it, he likes it, and then he said it was appropriate to cover his butt. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you're looking at it from the perspective of what's appropriate for old Nantucket, it's gonna keep everybody grounded in it. That's all.
I think the reason why the MAB came up with the old Nantucket is we've seen what's happened in the new Nantucket, and it's not even close to what old
Yeah.
Nantucket was.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're trying to at least have one area that we can actually save the way it should be, because we've already lost the rest of it.
I think you.
Sorry, we have.
No, I think you echo
We're all guilty.
You echo the sentiments of, I think, many people, and you echo, I know, John's sentiments with respect to the OHD and the Wisconsin Historic District and some of the rest of the island. So I think you're going to have a sympathetic ear. You're going to have support on that. It's just a matter of pinning it down, what's appropriate, what's not. Make the list as long as you want.
Okay.
And then we can. And
Yeah,
then,
then you can call through it.
well, then our job will be to say, okay, well, we can help you by, okay, we see a hole here, or we see that this isn't something that's under the HCC's control, but it does warrant further discussion. Let's put it in this column, and then we kind of categorize and organize it so we can make a recommendation. That's all we're trying to do. But we have so much on our plate, that's why we gave it back to you to do. Because if we try to do it just from some pictures, I'm not saying pictures aren't a good idea, they'd be awesome. If you came in and you had that list and then you had some pictures, even on, like you just did a digital, we can stick them on that computer and put them up
Right.
here.
Yeah.
It would be great. And then, I think it's kind of up to you guys. I don't think if this was if you were talking about controversial topics, I would suggest, as chair of this group, before we made a recommendation to the full commission, that you would involve a broader group than the Nantucket Advisory Board. I don't think you're talking about anything that's at all like that. You know what I mean? Okay, so here's an
I
example.
think whatever we come up with, I think not only would Nantucket residents be happy with it,
Yeah.
but I think the island would be happy with it. Because we're protecting something that's unique to the west end of this island, which makes it part of Nantucket. It's not homogeneous. It's not the old historic district.
Yeah.
We're out in the west end. It's different.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think your point is well taken. I want to step back though on one thing. I think one area that is something that could be very quickly either misunderstood or misconstrued and then kind of get out of control is this concept of plants as an architectural element and whether they should be under the
I'm sorry.
HCC.
I just threw that out there.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that is one thing that I think the HCC would want to get more input on. But
It's fine.
just an example. I'm not saying don't include it on your list because it's important. I'm just saying that that's an example of something that we might want to get a bigger feedback on.
I just think that would be something that you would put in there, make
Yeah.
a recommendation, even though you can't deny an application, because you know why they want to put some cypress trees.
Yeah.
They want,
Make a recommendation now, put it on the list to be addressing it, because Okay, last thing on this for me, I think, is we're hoping you're looking at this from like a Nantucket, Mattocket 2050 perspective. What is it you want to see in 2050? Right now, we can't do anything about plant materials other than a recommendation. But over the course of the next 10 or more years, we would, I believe, we as a member of the community, we would want to have in place controls to make sure that it doesn't, homes aren't just walled off with 10, 12-foot hedges. In
Then you've lost that neighborhood feel.
Sconset's different, okay, I want to bet, Sconset's
Yes, I
different
agree.
because it's big, expansive yards right on the main street. Mattocket, if you have that type of an architectural element, a structural plant material that's creating walls, it's a totally different thing. It's gonna be like a maze out there. Where in Mattocket, it's completely different feeling because homes are so far away from the street, I think on the main streets at least, that it evokes a certain nostalgic type of a thing that everyone really likes. Whereas in Mattocket, if that started to happen, it's gonna look like corridors. Do you think that that's accurate?
And you've lost that sense of community
Yeah.
that Sconset's always been different. It's an artist colony.
Yeah.
So, all right, just one more
Okay.
thing before I,
Please.
we are gonna need some guidelines. Obviously, you are working on guidelines as far as what happens with solar panels. And I
So-
don't think that should be, if, we would need guidance from you because all the structures there are very low. There is nothing to hide them if they're gonna be on the roof.
Okay, so can I give you feedback on that? My understanding is that last night, a test case was approved in Mattocket. Is that correct?
Test case.
I wasn't at the meeting last night.
On what?
Solar in Mattocket on Washington.
All right, okay, you're coming in from the water, and you go left from Washington Street. It's the old, Jesus, Weldon House.
Which wall?
The first house on the left, when you go down, coming from the water into Washington Street.
4. Was it 4?
Yeah, the house there, they've been in
Six.
before to put out the garage.
Washington Street?
Now they want it on a house, because it's facing the street.
Right, okay. So what happened was, in the past,
We house.
the applicant came in, they have a house that parallels the street and a garage that's perpendicular to the street. The garage is a gable facing the street.
What, Emery's house?
No, the house,
Jimmy Weldon, the meat cutter. His parents' house.
it's 6 Washington. I thought it was 4.
It is, it's 2 or 4 Washington Street.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, whatever home it is,
Yeah.
it's not to talk about that particular application other than it is to just illustrate what's recently been approved and when and, or why that I'm aware of. So the garage structure has a gable and the gable end, the doghouse end faces the street.
Face Washington.
Right, so what happened is the solar was reviewed and approved on the solar side of that structure because it was, my vote was because it was limited visibility due to its orientation to the street.
So it's, in essence, it's facing west then, it's facing
Yeah,
Mattocket.
I believe so,
mean,
yeah,
and a Mattocket Road.
yeah.
Okay.
Last night, the applicant was in and was approved for solar on, well, I'm not sure if it's west on the garage, was approved for solar on the Washington Street, the Washington Ave side, right?
Yeah, facing
Okay.
Mattocket Road.
Information was presented to the commissioners that persuaded them that it was approvable, pictures and different things that showed a recent installation somewhere else on the island. It was approved as a case, a test case to see what it would look like on a low structure, and what, in Mattocket, and whether it would be acceptable for future approvals. So it wasn't approved like, okay, great, you're good to go, bring in the rest, Mattocket. It was, we have somebody here who wants to try it, we've looked at this information, and we believe that it would be acceptable, and that was the vote, and it was approved. Typically, in my experience in the past, and I didn't look at the pictures last night, so I don't know what but typically in the past, we've approved solar if it's not visible from the street or if it screens. or if it's perpendicular or something like that. So that's kind of where we are. I'm just telling you all that because you were brought up solar. I wanted to give you an idea of what our guidelines had been to date and kind of where they are now.
I think my problem is if someone has a piece of property in Nantucket and wants to be eco-friendly and green and maybe even possibly save some money and wants to put solar panels up, I just don't see how we can say no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, it's historic and everything else, but you also have to be cognizant of things have changed.
Yeah, and actually, I think one of the points that was brought up last night, and I think it's a good point personally, is that, well, I'm on the fence. Direct response to your comment, I'm on the fence on that. I think there's just some structures that absolutely should not have solar on them based on their historical integrity, or how they relate to an historical structure in the area, or they create a fabric. On the other hand, the comment was made, and I do, I'm not talking out of both sides of my face here. I think this is where judgment comes in. There is something attractive about the idea of using solar. We are on an island. We are 30 miles out to sea. Mm-hmm. There's economic, practical realities of having alternative energy sources on your property.
Better all the time.
And in addition to that, there's also that kind of island mentality of resiliency and self-independence and so on and so forth. I thought it was a really good point. I've kind of added some thoughts of my own on that. I've always kind of been a case-by-case person when a solar comes in, and where some screening could happen, vegetative screening could happen to kind of mitigate the impact visually. I've always supported that.
But now you're talking against John. Now you're saying vegetative screening. How can that be in your purview when it's not elsewhere?
In the short term, it can be a recommendation to someone at the table in hopes that they'll pick up on the recommendation and do it. In the long term, my perspective is it becomes one of the tools in the HDC's arsenal to protect the historic fabric of Nantucket with respect to architectural character, and the HDC would be able to pick and choose. You have a historic building and we're sorry, we're not going to approve a hedge there that's more than 3 feet tall in the front. On the other hand, you have a structure that's 30 feet from the street. It's in a neighborhood that huge solar panels in the front yard really isn't consistent with the historic fabric. But if you were to put up a 5-foot hedge and maintain it 5 feet thereafter, no one would ever see it. So if it's part of our arsenal by law, then we can use it in different ways. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not speaking against solar. We're using just examples here as a way to kind of discuss the concepts. I'm not speaking against solar in any way, shape, or form. I've said it. I believe it in it. I think it's a good idea. I'm just saying I think that in the context of Nantucket and the historic fabric, the architectural character, we need to, for instance, in Wisconsin, if you put a solar array across the front yard and on 10 houses in Main Street, Wisconsin Main Street, it's going to change everything.
Well, you destroyed it.
Yeah. So I'm just saying if we have some type of a definition of plant material that's an architectural element that can be used to then hide something like that so it doesn't destroy that vista, then I believe we should have it. Do I think we should be telling people what kind of plant material they should have in their front yard or how many plants or how tall? No, not unless it's like right up on the street. It's not our...
No.
Why would we be involved in that?
There's a fine line there.
Yeah.
I recognize that.
The only other thing I would caution is just, get a variety of feedback from your membership on things like solar. I think it benefits the discussion for it to be robust. If there's someone who's for it and someone who's against it, I'm not talking about for or against solar energy. I'm talking about for or against its presentation and how it looks. And when I say against, I'm saying that they want to have some type of controls in place. I think it benefits us all to have a robust discussion about that, however brief, but something that's kind of well-rounded so that we're not making a mistake in our discussions and recommendations to the HDC, and the HDC is not making a mistake. I think it's good if we can just keep it, as much as you can, try and get diverse points of view, that's all.
I mean, I think over time, I think we're going to see solar panels more than blend in with your roof.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's just right now.
Well,
we're
one
not
of the
there
things
yet.
John's mentioned is, well, what happens when they're not, what happens when the newfangled solar comes along and these old ones are up there? Are they gonna be like the windmills that don't get taken down and no one takes care of anymore? And why aren't we putting those in our approvals?
Worst case scenario, you get 30 years.
Yeah, well, that's
a shingle last, right? Right, John?
Didn't go on, but it is.
Yeah, so-
I want to bring something up on the solar.
Please.
I've said it for almost 3 years now, frequently. The thing to do is outside of the 3 HDC areas, all right? Outside of it, all right? I'm sorry, inside of it. If you want solar, all right? Never mind the roofs. Set up regulation. You can have solar, you gotta put it on the ground. If you haven't got room to put it on the ground, well, you better go buy another house. I'm strong about this because people look at it, and some people say, hey, ruined that house with that roof on there. And I've heard it a couple times, you know. And I hate to say that I'm part of something that's gonna continue in the near future with all this modern stuff, all right? Now, I'm gonna tell you something. I bumped into the Clinton kid this morning. He's got that building down there, he's gonna put solar on, right behind the strip.
Yep.
All right, fine. We went inside and looked at it. I said, this was to open the scallops, this is a scallop shanty, what's it gonna be?
What, Glidden's? Talking about Glidden's?
The kid, yeah, you
Okay.
used to be selected.
Oh, Tobias, yeah. All right, yeah.
Okay. I said, well, what's gonna be in here? He said, this is my office for solar. You open the solar company.
Right.
Well, which is fine, you know. I think, I don't remember train of thought. The other was, there's one, what street was that on? Anyway, looking at it, I'm gonna do it this way. Here's the house, here's the street. The property comes in like this, here's bushes, all right? And they come over here, and they come out here. Right. Now, Karen Alliance was here, that girl.
Caroline's, yeah.
This house is shaped like this, L-shaped. Now you can see this roof and mostly this roof from out in the street. We had no item over there, but, yeah. He recommended putting more screening out here and put it in up to here this way, because I think there's parking here. In other words, if you're out in the street looking in, you're going to see very little of that stuff on the roof. It's coming.
So you're saying there are some instances where landscaping needs to be used as screening?
Well, we can't say, put some right away, because the building, I think 16 to 17 feet high.
Sure,
It's a
yeah.
real low one. But we can't tell them, screen this with, ivy up the side of the
Yeah, no, I understand.
wall, You can't, I don't think we have the authority to tell people and interfere in the plantings,
Well, we don't, but there is a valid discussion to be had as to whether there could be some usefulness in having some ability to do that without getting into people's business
Right.
about
Okay.
the type of plants they have
I'll go
where.
back to another thought I had, whether it's be seen from speed of travel away. Okay. Well, why is everybody, and I mean, most of them, that are outside the old HDC areas, they want everybody to have a swimming pool, okay? Fine, you can have a swimming pool, but why we tell a guy he's got to run it down the back of his property up to the front, and have the pool here and the patio and what do you call them, little cooking houses there, whatever that.
Oh, the cabana.
The cabana, yeah.
Equipment shed.
I can use it. Yeah, cookie stampers here, that's one, But to me, why are we saying, now they take a picture of somebody else's yard back here, here's the house,
Yeah.
And you see the hedges going along, nice and trim, maybe 4.5, 5 feet high, but you see the fence posts. They don't put them in between the hedges. But if you're standing out in the street, you look past his house, you can see all the posts going down.
Right. Well, that should get picked up.
A fence is a fence.
But we address that so it gets picked up under inspection so that new people who come in, it has to be hidden. So that's how we address it. But with Nantucket, I think that's one of the things that Brad and the Nantucket, when I say Brad, the Nantucket Advisory Board is looking to control relative to the historic character, the architecture, and what's been out there, what you can see and what you can't see from the street, or from the
And
water.
we can't deny a swimming pool.
Yeah.
If it comes before the board, we see, as you're talking about, whether it meets the requirements for the Connecticut Advisory Board, but then it's a zoning issue, it has nothing to do with us. We
Right.
have to look at it and forget the zoning. Is it appropriate? Is it visible from the street? Hopefully, no. It's usually on the back of the property, the building is in front of it.
Sure.
And 9 times out of 10, we approve it,
Yeah.
because it meets,
Well, I think we're gonna go over,
But it-
the two things that I got together. We're gonna ask your opinion as a committee, and then we're gonna listen what you say, and if other public wants to put input, then it comes to us, and we're gonna go over it. Well, we should be taking that thing, tearing it apart.
I hope so.
You know, what are we gonna use in Connecticut? You know, what are we gonna take out of it that doesn't affect Connecticut?
Well, and we're gonna rely on the Connecticut Advisory Board to come up with a structure for that, and then we're gonna review it, like you just said, in the context of what we know sitting on the HDC, and what we know about the guidelines, and what we know about Connecticut.
Yeah.
But we're looking to them to give us the advice on, they're the Connecticut Advisory Board, and we're, you know, and
The
I.
HCC is the final, well, the public and the HCC is the final arbiter on that. I mean,
Right, but
We're
we-
making recommendations on it.
And I think we're relying on those, I believe strongly, and we should be, because that's why you all are in place. And if we're not relying on those types of things, then why do we have you all?
Of course, we're getting deeper and deeper, and I'm just as bad sitting here talking about fences and pools and.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just as
I
bad
just-
because we haven't started with Connecticut Advisory Foreman first, and then meeting with that Tuesday.
Which is a good segue to getting on to our next topic.
Exactly.
And saying thank you to Brad for coming in, and
Appreciate it.
we look forward to seeing you Tuesday, and we hope this was productive.
Thank you.
I hope you didn't cut off one of your handle.
I had a
Yeah,
couple
you
days
get
to
back
deal
to
with
us,
it.
it'll be fine. Thank you. I know you got things to do, like everybody
All
else
right.
but me.
Thank you all.
Thank
See you
you.
Tuesday.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you for rounding the horn on that, Kevin.
yeah.
Get him here.
Well, actually, I overheard him talking to John today, and I do believe that the Connecticut Advisory agenda, they've all been to meetings. They just haven't been reviewed by Connecticut Advisory.
No, but I mean,
Because they haven't had.
did you round him the horn to get him in here today?
No,
Oh.
John did.
Okay, well, thank you to John. Thanks, John.
Did you ask John to make up one of those for me?
These are for you and for Steve.
Those are ours,
Did you want
which is
one
our next
now?
topic.
Yes. Okay.
Where is discussion matter on matters concerning interest, HEC, is that the one?
Building with Nantucket in mind, look at that, right on schedule.
Who put this together?
So,
John,
John had it.
Looks pretty good, you know, I didn't say there's, some crazy stuff in here that it gives you ideas how to do something. And then you shouldn't be having it, because they say, oh, I wanted one of those, you know. And actually, you're gonna start a problem, you know.
I don't know, I heard someone say the only thing that needs to change in this is the phone number in the front of the book.
Go to page 113, that's all.
Okay, but before we get,
Yeah.
I wanna caution you, because I'll take comments, but there's two of us here, number one, and we haven't got a structure together yet. I don't wanna get into details about anything at the moment. We're gonna get into details in this, like you wanna rip it apart as much as you want, and we're gonna get some help from a historian and all the rest of it on it. I don't wanna get too deep into it right now, because
Okay, I had one side comment.
we're
that's
gonna be
all.
redundant.
Page 113.
Yeah,
Top right, all right. Now, when she spoke sliding glass doors. Okay?
yeah, I'm listening.
Now, I don't really love, sliding glass doors. I care more for a French door, you know, a double or a triple, it's awkward. But anyway, this is the thing that's always caught my eye of a good example of what not to do.
Right?
And that's the same thing as right there. I'm just saying to say, you know, there's others here, there's triangle glass and all that stuff. But,
Yep.
but well, I think between all of us, a lot of this book is going to disappear.
Well, I personally don't believe it should disappear. I think it would be helpful if it was, part of it was the narrative part, and then part of it was the user manual, so you could pick it up and use it to actually inform a design without having to read everything. Because I think the problem with the book correct me if I'm wrong, you've read it more times than I have, is that it's too long.
It is.
It doesn't get to,
covers too much.
it doesn't get to the, right to the point. I know sometimes that's like me, but this is much longer. So I think that, yeah, there could be changes made to it. Personally, that's my perspective,
Yeah.
to make it more user-friendly. But, okay, so that's one of the things, that's certainly one of the things we're gonna look into. Now, which version is this? Does this have the
What?
this doesn't have the, oh, it does. Awesome. Okay. I was thinking, oh no, it doesn't have, it's got appendix.
Appendix, yeah. That should be in the back, right here. Yes. Appendix E?
G. Keep
Okay.
going, one more. G comes after E.
D comes after E?
G, good.
Oh, G.
Echo,
Yeah, I know where you got your
Echo,
education.
Gabriel, right. You're looking for G before E.
Damn hearing aids.
I'm just teasing you,
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, you get there. Now where's G?
G's it's the second.
Last. Oh, yeah. That's the one I.
Yeah, so this is the newer one.
Mhm.
So these are to write in and make notes and stuff, or if you want to put a page in, or however you want to work with it, it's up to you. But it's for us, individual members of the group to have. And then I did speak to John and asked him if maybe he could get some for the rest of the group, because I don't know that the commissioners all have the most recent book. It's very hard to find it. You can't get it. Anyways, John, without getting into details, I don't want to cut you off, but
Go ahead, go ahead.
without getting into details, I don't know that there's really much to be talking about with building with Nantucket in mind. What I want to do is get, as the guy who's going to have to organize it, is get everybody's feedback and then try and put everything into kind of a outline, and then have some discussion and then reorganize it from there based on what you and Val as the OFC and John want to do. All right?
Alright.
And then, I guess the other thing, next item on the agenda is discussion of other organizational matters of concern or interest to HDC and our group, our committee. I think the Nantucket thing is an example of maybe, we need to get more people involved in the process. But I don't know that it's something that we really need to take up. They're aware of it. They're kind of self-regulating. Brad mentioned himself that they're looking at maybe getting some new members. You're good with that, John?
I'm sorry, repeat the last half.
The Nantucket Advisory Board and not having a quorum, you mentioned yesterday that you were concerned about it. So this is an opportunity. I guess what I'm saying is, it seems to me that I know that they're aware of it because Brad mentioned that it's a concern, and they're looking at getting some other members. Due to health issues, they're considering getting some, kind of renewing their membership with different people who might be able to come in and partake.
Well, we've done that. Where did we do that? To get more members on any subcommittee,
Yeah,
and we advertised. And we told those, we checked their attendance record.
right.
And we told them, we're gonna reappoint the whole board. And they've been coming all right so far, this is maybe 6-7 years ago. But we wiped out some of them that weren't attending the meetings.
So are you saying we should do that again, or are you saying we're good where we are?
I think we'll do a study of who, if you're gonna do it with the Nantucket committee, yes. Get their input, say now, there's 5 of you. How many meetings did you make last year? Just ask, how many meetings did you make? Well, I made 2. 2? Yeah? We have 52 meetings a year, maybe.
Well, I don't know about
So,
52, but
If you lack on it, either tell us you're gonna show up or get off.
sure. Yeah, my understanding is that attendance is one of the fundamental parts of being on one of the commissions or the boards, but, I think we'll just talk with Brad about it and see if he can kind of strengthen them up. Because I know that the commissioners are relying on the advisory board to make decisions.
This is true.
Yeah.
What's been changed in here for this?
Well, they use thinner paper.
Huh? You threw it in a paper, yeah.
Okay. You got anything else for us to discuss today, John?
Yes, last night was pretty cool. 4 meetings, ran through 34 items at 5 minutes a night.
Nice.
Whip rate, yeah, but, yeah.
Oh, you're not so sure, huh?
Oh, yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, it's on. Don't
Oh,
say
yeah,
anything you don't want to record it, ever.
Right. Okay.
It was a good meeting. You guys, there was 4 of you and you got through it all. That's good enough.
I'll make a motion to,
So you want to make a motion to adjourn at this
Adjourn.
point? Okay, so I guess we can all accept that.
I tell you what happened last night.
No, I don't want to know.
I'm gonna tell you,
I don't wanna
because
know.
your pet, not mine.
My
You're-
bad.
Yeah, you're going after these crazy things for air conditioning. We discussed it very heavy last night.
Oh, did you? The
And
AC
I
stuff?
said, you don't have to put these things up. But anyway, somebody wanted one in Wisconsin, John, the engineer, John Stover, come in.
Oh, okay.
He does everything. Anyway, it's right in the middle, up to halfway up the street, on Center Street. And here it is going up there, gray. You know, he wants to, he said he wants to cover it up, so it'll run it to the top, and then put a little, like the elbow for the corner, as though the gutter was connected to it. I said, well, it sounds like a good idea, John, but you gotta do something. Well, gotta paint it gray. Then cover the shingle roughly the best you can. Put a 6x6 box over that plastic thing. And he was somewhat sorry, but he's representing whoever owns the house.
Wait, so did they approve it or did they not? With the drop box, right?
Yeah.
The cedar drop box to
Right.
match our guidelines.
Yeah.
It's not on the front of the house though, is it?
Yeah.
Because the guidelines are nothing on the front.
Where's the front of that house? If this is the street, the house is this way,
Yeah.
2 stories.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, you hopped on it for a while. We have,
Well, I harped on it because you kept giving me a hard time.
Yeah, but you have it to make you smile. Anyway, I'm just saying,
I'm teasing.
a lot of things we wouldn't have discussed last night and let them go through. Some of the stuff through last I couldn't do it.
Well, that's another reason why I think, well, we're not going to talk about the guidelines anymore because we're out of our meeting. We'll get there. Eventually.
Good, 219.
Thank you, Kathy.